Dear Chairman Wahlberg and members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for asking me to be here today. My name is Tammy Miser, and I have traveled from Lexington, Kentucky to give you a very personal story of why OSHA regulations are needed. In 2003, my brother, Sean Boone, he was 33 years old, and he was killed in an aluminum dust explosion. The company, Hayes Limmers, they produced aluminum wheels. They had had fires on a regular basis, and the protocol was that they let the fires burn down, and then they go back in and relight the chip malt furnace. And they were also instructed not to call the fire departments because it was costing them too much money to do this. So that's what they did, and my brother went back in to collect his tools in the furnace room, and there was an explosion. This explosion caused aluminum dust to rain down from the rafters in the equipment, and there was a second, more intense explosion. This explosion actually left my brother blind with third-degree burns over most of his, or at least 90% of his body is what they were saying. Sean was still conscious. He was still aware of what was going on. And some say that in between his cries for help, that he was joking about a fishing trip. It was just the kind of guy he was. He was a really wonderful guy. So when we were able to actually, he had no clue what condition his body was in because he couldn't see. And we think that that's probably why he was able to get through it, and he was conscious and knowing what was going on. But when we finally were able to see him, his face was splitting, he was swollen, his body was raw, and they refused to bandage his body. And I had been with him for a lifetime. He was my brother. And I could only recognize him by a few freckles on his face and the remnants of his eyebrow. And this is the hardest thing that a family can face, truly. And many can't take this. And in 2007, my youngest brother drove halfway across the United States with a few photos of Sean and the phone records of the night he was killed tucked in his Bible. He proceeded to shoot himself in the head. And I can't say that this incident alone caused my brother to take his life, but I know that he was not able to handle it, and that was what was on his mind. The buzz is that the regulations kill jobs, and I just really feel that this is nonsense. There's only been 2 regulations in the past 10 years, Crane and Derricks and Chromium. Both only affect a fraction of the U.S. businesses. As I talk to families around the country, I don't see this huge avalanche of regulations. It's more like a drought. A rule to protect construction workers from dying in confined spaces has been on the regulatory agenda for 15 years. This little guy here, Stephen Lillicrap, he was only 21 years old when he was pulled in to the cables of a 100-ton crane. OSHA had been working on revising outdated crane standards for 10 years. But this rule came too late for Stephen. It was finally issued in July and is expected to prevent 22 deaths and 175 injuries and millions of dollars in property damage per year. The benefits far outweigh the cost of this rule. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board warned OSHA in 2006 about combustible dust standards. They were also, and it's not well known, but in 2002, the year before my brother was killed, they had also let OSHA know that this was an issue. So if just the National Fire Protection Association standards were mandatory, my brother would still be here, and others would still be here today. In 2008, the Imperial Sugar Refinery dust explosion killed 14 workers and injured 36. And some of these were severely injured, severe burns. And the means to prevent this was well known. Some companies choose to gamble with workers' lives because there are no OSHA standards. When preventable disasters strike in the workplace, they not only take a huge toll on the injured and their families, but workers can lose their jobs and communities suffer. In 2009, the Sunoco refinery in Pennsylvania, the company decided not to rebuild after their explosion. 50 workers were laid off. That same year, ConAgra Slim Jim plant exploded. 3 workers were killed and 71 were injured. Before the disaster, 700 people were employed there. Now the place is closed. A contractor working for ConAg using a dangerous blowout procedure that purged natural gas in the indoor work environment is what had caused this. It was well known. If OSHA could have prevented this, with governing and rulemaking, this would have never happened. There's no price tag that can be put on seeing your husband walk your daughter down the aisle or seeing your baby born. I've talked to family members that have had children and their husbands are gone. Their babies are never going to know their father. It's nothing like seeing your child graduate from college or holding your grandbaby. I respectfully ask the subcommittee to not just look on one side of the ledger, the cost, but remember the benefits of the OSHA rules for workers, responsible employers, and families and communities.